Hello, everyone. Big changes are on the way for payments in Europe. EU regulators have just introduced a new set of measures to transform the industry, to put the customers more in control and afford them more protection. But what does this so-called EU payments package really mean for banks, for payment services providers and other FS institutions? And why will they need to think beyond compliance in a world where, as we know, consumers are demanding ever more personalised services? Well, with me, as is often the case, is Susan Barton, Director in our European payments practice, and she's going to help me make sense of all of this. And maybe, Susan, before we get into details of the package, your team has just surveyed a number of European banks on the payments package to see how ready for action they are and how well they understand the changes that are coming down the pipe. What did that survey show?
I would say that we saw really different levels of awareness about the key payment regulations. There's a lot of uncertainty about how this regulation is going to affect the business and then what changes and investments are going to need to be made to achieve compliance. For example, less than half of the businesses have already done regulatory impact assessments, although many of these regulations are going to be top 10 investment items in the next few years. And there's a lot of concern also about how this regulation is going to impact payments revenue, particularly from a strategic point of view.
And now these proposals were first kind of mentioned by the European Commission July last year. Why do you think it is then that so many organisations are still getting to grips with what the legislation really means for them?
Yeah, I think some banks and PSPs were waiting for the proposals to be finalized to understand what are those minimum requirements and what are the exact deadlines, but also due to the complexity. I mean, our survey showed that 70% of organizations still don't know what changes they're going to need to make to comply, much less how to position themselves strategically. And this is partially because the payment package affects so many parts of the business. We're not just talking around compliance and maybe IT. We see an impact on operations, risk, even functions like HR and marketing are directly impacted by the regulation.
And so what do we know about the proposals so far then, and why are they being introduced now?
Well, it's exciting because what we're seeing is the EU is wanting to encourage consumers to make electronic payments. They're telling people that it's safer, and they're making it safer. They're making it easier. Plus, there's a lot of interest in promoting innovation and competition within the EU. If I drill down into a little bit of detail, we see 3 different regulations or initiatives within the payments package. First of all, there's PSD3. This is setting really clear rules on authorizing and supervising payment institutions, including digital e-money. Second, we have PSR, which is continuing what we've seen with PSD2 around open banking regulation. And here we're seeing a strong focus on protecting customers from fraud, providing better control over customer data. People are going to be able to withdraw cash when they go to the shop. And then also just better standardization on payment transactions when they're electronic. Finally, we have FIDA, where what's being called is open finance. So we take everything we've done with open banking, exchanging information for payments, and we're going to make that available for finance, including insurance, wealth asset management, and more banking services. And so we're going to see an exchange of information on financial products such as savings accounts, investments, loans, and non-life insurance. Now, FIDA is the only part of the payment package which was not voted on in April 2024, but we do have a new draft of the regulation which was released that provides a lot more clarity around how this data is going to be exchanged. In short, with the package, we're looking about balancing growth in the market and protecting our customers. And there's also part of a larger plan for a single EU digital market.
So lots to look forward to. I mean, I know each element of the package has its own set of distinct implications for banks and PSBs. But if you can summarize at a macro level, what do those impacts look like?
So some of the big implications are immediately going to be around cost. When we talk to banks and payment service companies, they're talking about increased in operational and compliance costs given the new regulation. And specifically, we're going to see strengthened security measures, more strong customer authentication, Means investments in new technologies and systems. Particularly as we look from moving from open banking to open finance, we're going to see third-party providers are going to be able to access account data. This means competition is going to increase, plus there's going to be a technology investment there. And then finally, with this focus on customer rights and protections, it means that banks and PSPs are going to need to develop even more customer-centric services for their clients. As much as there's some costs here, with these changes, we're going to see a lot of innovation as the customers are expecting more customized services for them. The banks will have to become more customer centric. In our survey, 81% of companies said that they're going to have to modify or upgrade their existing infrastructure to comply with the regulations.
So lots for organisations to do and to focus on, Susan. What can organisations start doing now to get ahead of the curve?
You're asking a question that I'm hearing a lot lately. And that first step is to really understand the regulations so that then you can assess where you are and where the regulation says to see where the gap is. In that case, you might be able to see if you're going to need new technologies, if you're going to need to upgrade your systems. And then once you've been able to assess that gap, that's when you can really look at if you want to be market leading, to think about new products that you might want to innovate, how the competition is likely to change, or what new players might come into the market, how to provide that customization of products and services, and also how to better leverage customer data that you have access to. When we talked to our respondents, they said that 75% of them said that digital payments and customized user experience is going to drive the most significant changes in customer behavior.
Thank you, as always, Susan, for those insights. As you've clearly highlighted, lots of change ahead, but also lots of opportunity.